Hey watch friends, today we're going to take a look at a Danish microbrand I've been curious to check out for quite some time. This is Henry Archer, and they were actually loaned in a pair of these for review. This is the Nordso on the right here and the Nordlys on the left. We'll be spending most of the time looking at the Nordso, but I will have a full review coming of the Nordlys, and additionally I'll show this in a little more detail later on in the video. But today this is going to be our main focus. Before we dive into this watch itself, let's go ahead and check out the packaging. These watches ship in relatively simple but also nice packaging. On the exterior, you have this slip cover, which has the Henry Archer logo and name, and then designed in Denmark. Then once you slide that off, you have this inner cardboard box. Popping that open, they give you some nice things with it. So you have this certificate of authenticity here, which does certify for its 2-year warranty. Additionally, as you can see, this is the celestial blue we're looking at. Then there's this sheet that comes with it, just kind of congratulations, as well as some basic instructions there. I'll pan that across so you can get an idea. It does have a manual that comes with that as well. You can check these things out. Then you can see I already sized that one. It does have a pouch on the inside here. This is just a nice basic fold-over type pouch there for travel. And this actually even came wrapped in tissue paper, which I thought was a really nice touch and made it aesthetically pleasing and a nice experience to unbox. All right, now that we have a better feel for how this ships, let's take a deep dive into the overall specifications. This particular one, as you saw, is a little bit smaller than the Nordlys. This is coming in at 40 millimeters, measured from the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position. The bezel does step down on this one, and that's coming in at 39.2 millimeters, so almost a millimeter step back. The lugs are a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lug to lug is a nice wrist versatile 47.2 millimeters. The thickness on my calipers is coming in at 10.9 millimeters, and that is including this flat sapphire crystal, which does have 6 layers of inner AR coating. Their specs, I believe, state 10.5. I expect that that's a difference of with or without the crystal. As far as the movement, this has a Miyota 9039, which if you're familiar with the channel, you know it's one I like. The 9000 series, great. The 9039 is the no date variant of the 9015, so you get all the good things with it. Higher beat, 28,800 beats per hour, hacking, hand winding, roughly 40-hour power reserve, all that kind of good stuff. And it is, of course, an automatic movement. As far as the water resistance, you can see at the 6 o'clock, this particular variant comes at 200 meters or 20 atmospheres of water resistance. On this bracelet, sized to my 6.5-inch wrist, this is only coming in at 128.7 grams, so really not too bad at all. Slightly on the lower side of a middleweight category there. All right, so now that we have the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into the watch itself. First, for the colors. There's actually a whole bounty of colors that are available. There's this brand new blue one that we're looking at here today. They actually have a DLC version of this as well. And then there's some different white variants with or without black markers. There's a black dial variant, a mint green variant, as well as some purple and various other colors. So do keep an eye on their website. I can't feature them all, but they have a lot of different colors and textures that are available, and they're dropping new ones all the time. As far as the dial texture, that's going to vary depending on what variant you go with. This particular one we're looking at today, as you can see, has nicely embossed diamonds across the surface of the dial. However, some of the other colors do have a circular brushing, such as that purple, which is really nice looking as well. One of the things that I like about this diamond texture is, despite the boldness of the pattern itself, the finish is somewhat of like a satin for that. So what that does is that subdues it a little more than if they had gone with a little more gloss or sheen, and I think it's well executed. It has enough to keep you interested without being too over the top, especially when you want it to be a little more subdued. The dial has printing at the 12 o'clock position with their Henry Archer logo, which I think is a very attractive logo. Then down at the 6 o'clock position, you have the model name, in this case Nordso, as well as the water resistance down below that in nice small text. Moving out to the perimeter, you can see that this does have a printed chapter ring as well. As you'd expect, it has the pronounced markers at the 5-minute or 5-second indicators, but then additionally, kind of uncharacteristic of most watches, this actually has a smaller scale, so there's 10 ticks in between each of those 5 instead of traditional 5, so you actually have this in half-second increments or half-minute increments as you go through there for precision timekeeping, though we'll talk about that a little further. As far as the hardware, the handset on this is what I would describe as being a polished, skeletonized, pill-type handset. It's a nice circular shape overall for both the minute and hour hand. The second hand is a traditional lollipop configuration, and in this particular version, it is a white accent color to really easily differentiate it and adds good contrast against that blue. The markers themselves are going to be a mix of all polish, but they're going to be a mix of rectangles at your 12, 3, 6, and 9 position, as well as circles for the remaining ones, which I think has nice visual appeal there as far as symmetry across the dial. And I think the entire dial configuration, I think it has a good amount of space to breathe, especially with those skeletonized hands there. But additionally though, I think it's a nice layout and configuration overall. There's going to be a nice application of lume across these as well. You actually have the highest grade of BGW9 that is applied, though you'll see a slight color differentiation between the hands versus the markers, not uncommon, especially if it's a different factory there. The lume has actually endured quite well in my usage. The one thing that I do find a little bit odd is on the bezel insert, you'll notice that these circles, so once you get past your 15, every other marker there on the bezel is actually not lumed, which that was kind of an odd choice and not one that I expected from PIX. As far as the bezel itself, this is, as you'd expect for a dive style configuration, this is a 120 click unidirectional bezel, and we'll listen to the action in just a moment. The insert on this is actually a polished ceramic bezel insert, very nicely polished, good looking, and I think complements it well. On the outside, you're going to have a nice knurling finish that's applied here, and again, we'll talk about that further. And then again, as we already looked at, this is set back. So what results in that is this has somewhat of a limited surface area. As you can see, it's not the thickest in the world here, but additionally, that knurling is a little bit on the passive side. So between being set back, not having a lot of surface area, and having a passive knurling, let's go ahead and listen. You can hear very nice tactile click. Really pleased with that. Across the board. The bezel action itself, very crisp, excellent there. Additionally, as you can see, it doesn't have virtually any backplay. The biggest thing that you'll notice though is because of that surface area and because it's set back, it is a little bit hard to grip a hold of. Got to spin that back around there, missed the mark. But with that being said, you know, it is plenty usable. As you can see here, I can get it going. It just definitely is not as easy as I would like it to be to manipulate, and we'll talk about that as we go further, particularly in the critique section. As far as the case on this one is an extremely thin construction, particularly if you look at this mid case. So right through here, it has what seems like an impossibly thin line, and that's an interesting design choice that we'll talk about as we look at that case back. The length of this runs with a nice horizontal brushing, so running from front to rear, you've got that brushing going along, very cleanly applied. Additionally, that's going to be sandwiched with polished chamfers at both the top and a very pronounced polished chamfer with both the case back as well as the case itself there on the bottom. Again, nice flow for that downturn. It does sit slightly proud of this case back because the case back is a bit on the thicker side. However, I haven't found that I've had the flying saucer effect, as you'll see in the wrist footage here shortly. On the 3 o'clock side, you can see that this does not have a crown guard, which I think is in keeping with the overall design and nice clean aesthetic for that. So I'm very pleased with that overall. As far as the crown itself, this is coming in at 5.8 millimeters, which is a little on the small side. However, it has plenty of grip area, so I haven't found this to be hard to grip a hold of at all. It is a screw down configuration, and as you can see, it is signed again with the Henry Archer logo and nice use of dual texture there to really accent and complement that. As I already mentioned, this does carry forward with the checkering there, so you can see a nice mirror for that, but this is easy to grab a hold of. Overall, this provides actually, I think, more grip than the bezel, though I expect that that's just because this is a little freer to access. Hence, if this had been kicked out, it'd be the same kind of way there. Shifting over to the case back, this one is somewhat uncommon for a dive style watch. This actually is not a screw-in case back, rather it's held in with screws. The finishing is going to be a mix of brush as well as that heavy application of polish that we saw. The brushing is circular and it does go around that sapphire crystal exhibition window that's in the middle. Additionally, around that crystal, you can see that there is a lot of text that's printed. It's relatively subtle because it's a small font size. However, there is a lot of text on there overall. Shifting over to the bracelet. The bracelet, as you'd expect, is 20 millimeters at the lugs, and then it does have a nice taper as it goes down to the clasp, fairly aggressive, dropping 4 millimeters down to 16 millimeters. It is a true beads of rice style, and by that I mean it has individual articulating links, so those beads do move independently. That is not a single setup there. As far as the end link, this is, I guess, technically a male end link. However, because of the articulation that we'll see, I put this more in the vein of wearing like a female end link would. The bracelet is retained with pins, so a little bit more of a chore to adjust initially. However, you don't ever have to worry about screws backing out. As far as the clasp on this is a fold over and double pusher construction. It is actually dual signed, so you have the Henry Archer on the fold over portion, and then you have their logo on the actual clasp itself. It has 3 micro adjust, and it is a milled construction for the inner bridge on that. As far as the articulation, as I mentioned, this has just fantastic drape all the way around. So first, checking out, look at that, just folding completely flat to the case back. Really nice there, and that's why I'm saying this is in many respects more reminiscent of a female end link, though as you can see it does protrude slightly past there. But additionally though, check out this drape. It has plenty of lateral play, but additionally, as far as just the drape over finger, you can see there, just really hugs onto the wrist. Nice for that, and really adds to the comfort. Some people have talked about this pulling their hair when on wrist. As I'm sure you've seen, I have reasonably hairy wrist, and I have not actually had that issue at all, any more so than any others. Really, the only time I ever catch is in the clasp itself. One thing that I do want to say with the clasp, while I always love a toolless micro adjust, this, look how thin that is. This really does give a streamlined and svelte appearance to this. It's very slim through here, and then very slim through here as well relative to toolless micro adjust. So that's a nice trade-off for that. I do still miss the toolless micro adjust, but I like that touch. Alright, so now that we have a better feel for the watch itself, let's go ahead and bring in some different comps so we can get an idea as to how this stacks up. We already looked at the Nordless. This just gives you an idea here as far as the overall sizing. This is at a 40mm, this at a 42, as we'll see. So there's a lot more dial presence on this one. Next, bringing up, this is a Zelos Swordfish 40, and this just gives you an idea of overall sizing. I think this has a little more dial presence, but they're relatively comparable for the aesthetic. This definitely has a wider and chunkier bezel. As you can see, that slightly overhangs, whereas this is set back. Bringing in another blue, this is a Zelos Mako in the Midnight Blue. So you can see here, this is just a much deeper coloration of the blue. This is more of like a denim or blue jean color, whereas this is much more of like a deep navy for that one. All right, bring in, here's the RZE Endeavor. This is again another 40mm. You can see this one does have less dial presence than the RZE, which I find has a lot of dial presence for the 40 sizing. And then bringing in, this is a Revolot Hex Mariner. This is their 39, so this is the smaller variant. And you can see, again, relatively comparable. I think a little more here, especially with this having the steep rehaut around the perimeter there. Changes up the overall aesthetic for that. But that gives you an idea as far as sizing of those ones. Let's go and check out. There's for some thickness there. There's the Endeavor, and then here's Mako, just to kind of round that out so you can get an idea of the overall thinness. This, I think, especially when you're comparing that against the double dome of the Mako, really looks slim there. All right, so now that we have all that out of the way, let's go ahead and wrap things up with the positives, the critiques, as well as my overall summary on this one. First, for the positives. There's really a lot to like with this one, and I've enjoyed my time with it. We've talked a fair amount about the thinness, and that's one of the things that I think is a shining attribute of this. Additionally, though, because of both that thinness, as well as the articulation of the bracelet, and all those kinds of things, I think this is really quite comfortable to wear as well. Additionally, I personally find this to be a very attractive layout. I like the dial aesthetic, I like the texture, but not just the texture on this variant, I actually like the radial brush texture or the circular brush texture on the other variants as well, just depending on what flavor you're really looking for. They have so many different colors that are available, and I think all the colors are really good looking. I've actually had a hard time picking a favorite, though I'll give you a spoiler. I actually have one on the way, and I'll tell you what that is at the end. The fit and finish I found to be quite good actually for the price point. These are coming in at roughly $409 US to $455 US. I believe $455 is the retail, but I've seen them often on sale for $409, which is at time of publishing I believe what this one is coming in at, though don't quote me on that because the price might have changed slightly there. But that being said, I really don't think it's bad at all for overall pricing for the specs and for what you're getting in the overall design, as well as just the fit and finish. I do think is very commensurate with that. Weirdly looked at the clasp. Again, while I would prefer toolless, I do love the thinness of that, so I think that's well done. So there's a good amount to like across the board. As far as some of the critiques though, we've already touched upon some of these, but I do want to expound on them slightly. First, for the bezel itself. As we already looked at, the bezel action I do definitely think is a bit on the stiff side given the surface area you have. With this being a somewhat of a skin diver style, I wouldn't have minded if they actually kicked that out slightly and either made that flush or even potentially extending out. While I do like the aesthetic of this, that would have opened up for overall dial expanse, which some might have preferred. But more importantly, that would have definitely made this easier to grip. Another thing that they possibly could have done would have been to go over to a coin edge type insert. I think that would have been easier to grip a hold of, though I would have wanted to see the crown changed over if they did that as well. But that's just a preference item based on actual functional usage there, but really for me, it's not a big deal and it's a fairly minor item to begin with. The chapter ring, while I do appreciate this aesthetic, and one of the things that I didn't mention is that chapter ring, specifically, they were actually going for following 120 clicks. So you might have already deduced that from the nature of the breakout of having 10 for every individual 5 here. But that's a 120 click chapter ring. So that really allows you, even with the bezel, to get kind of doubting very easily for precision. That being said, where I think you get the trade-off is in quick at-a-glance legibility precision. Because you have to, so every 2 is actually 1, you're going to have to count that out there. Though I will say they put a larger one right in the middle there, so at the 5, so that gives you actually 2.5 there, so you can just go 1 past that and 3. So it does make it a little easier once you get used to that to try to find the precise time for it. However, it's something that I personally would have probably preferred just to have a more traditional chapter ring for that, though I think it's a cool idea and a nice aesthetic. The lume, as we already talked about, I think the bezel specifically was a little bit of an odd choice of not having the circles with having lume applied, but that's something, again, very minor critique there. And then finally, the case back. I would have loved to have seen if they could have slimmed out this case back. However, just looking at the total, the water resistance, the movement limitations, the handset stack, all those kinds of things, I understand that there's only so much that you can actually do, especially when you have a mid case that's this thin. However, I would have loved to have seen if there was some way that they could have just better integrated or better nested that a little bit more so it did just tuck. So while you don't get the flying saucer effect, I still would prefer that to be a little bit thinner. So where does that leave us overall? As I already kind of indicated with the spoiler there, I actually have one on the way. Specifically, I have the Verde Menta, which is the mint green variant, and I'm actually hoping to add the neon, which is their purple with the radial brushing. So that gives you an idea right there of clearly I like them since I already have one on order and possibly a second one that's going to be coming as well. For the overall first impression with Henry Archer, I think the finishing has been impressive. I think you get a good amount for your money. While there are some things that I would like to see changed overall, this is one that I've clearly enjoyed wearing, and I really like the aesthetic that they've achieved with just the different dial textures, the different coloration, all those kinds of things. So I hope this has been an interesting first look for you. If you did enjoy this, please do tap that like button. Additionally, if you haven't done so already, please give that subscribe button a smash there. And I would love to know what you think. Which ones are your favorite? What color do you like? What dial texture do you like? All those kind of things. Drop a comment, let me know. Thanks for watching.